The second misconception people have about Israel is the misconception of excessive force. Pictures that are put on television of Israeli tanks, Israeli soldiers facing tiny Palestinian children with rocks and with sometimes small pebbles. It looks like a very incongruous situation. It looks like the classic David versus Goliath situation. But in order to deal with this misconception, we have to take a step back and we have to understand the real scenario. The first point to know is that Israel has been fighting a real war. They are not fighting Palestinian children with rocks. They are fighting terrorists with real weaponry, automatic weapons, bombs, anti-tank missiles, a real army that can do real damage. An army, in fact, amongst the Palestinians that have killed over 1,000 Israelis over the last 5 years. Israel has been fighting a real war and not only has a responsibility as a nation, but has a moral responsibility to protect its civilians first and foremost. Secondly, though, we have to know that while Israel has that moral responsibility to protect its civilians, it has done it in a way where they always try to protect Palestinian civilians as well. A great example is what happened a few years ago in Jenin. After a Passover where there was a number of terrorist attacks, including in Netanya at a Passover Seder, when a Palestinian terrorist killed a number of Israelis eating their Passover Seder, Israel decided to go into the Palestinian city of Jenin. Jenin was known to be a hotbed of terrorists. Even Palestinian police would not go into Jenin because they knew it was such a terrible place to go into. The Israeli army decided to send their army inside. The Israeli generals went to the Israeli prime minister and said the easiest way to deal with the situation is to air bomb. We can air bomb where we know the terrorists are. The question the Israeli prime minister Ariel Sharon said at the time was how many Palestinian civilians would be either injured or killed by the bombing. The answer he received was too high, and he decided instead to send Israeli soldiers in door to door, house to house, looking for Palestinian terrorists. He decided to do this because he said that we cannot take innocent Palestinian lives. In that process, 25 Israeli soldiers were killed. They would not have been killed if Israel was willing to air bomb, but they were not willing to do that because Israel put a high price, a high level of Palestinian civilians. So number one, to deal with the issue of excessive force, we have to realize that Israel is fighting a real war. It's fighting a war that it has to fight back against. It has to defend its civilians against terrorists, just like any nation in the world would do. But secondly, we also have to know that Israel is fighting this war in a moral way. It is trying to balance the ability to defend its own citizens with also trying to help keep Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. It's a very difficult balance, and in fact, many countries in the world would never even consider this balance. But Israel is considering it and doing its best to try to balance it. One very important point to know when we deal with this issue of excessive force and how far Israel goes to even protect Palestinian citizens is that Palestinian terrorists use this against Israel. They say about Gandhi, why was Gandhi able to stand up against the British and in a peaceful way? Because he knew that the British would not just gun down innocent people. The Palestinians know the same thing about Israel. Palestinian terrorists hide amongst their own civilians because they know that Israel puts a high value on Palestinian civilian lives. The Palestinian terrorists know that if they hide amongst civilians, whether in their homes, whether in crowds, that Israel will not fire. They will not shoot at innocent Palestinian civilians unless terrorists use them as a hiding place. Palestinian terrorists do not wear uniforms, which is a war crime. They do these things because they know that the Israelis have a moral value of life, and they use it against Israel in order to hurt Israel.